Welcome to the 320 Way in Conversation, hosted by founder Karen Case.
Welcome to the 320 Way podcast, where today I'm in conversation with Heather BennettDoy-Jones, and she's going to tell us all about her life living with arthritis. Heather, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy you're here. So could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I'm sure anybody watching this will see you don't look like you're old enough to have arthritis. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
That is a common misconception. I have something called juvenile idiopathic arthritis, which basically means that I was a child when I was diagnosed. Anyone can have arthritis at any age, sadly. I was diagnosed at 3. I first started showing symptoms at 2 years old. I have had most of my joints quite badly affected over the years, and it has left me in a wheelchair all the time, which is difficult, but nowadays it gives me some freedom to be able to live life.
So you are 28, almost 29.
Yes.
So you are very young, and you said there about the misconception of arthritis being an older person's disease. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what are your memories of being diagnosed?
Yeah, I don't really remember it. There's kind of some very vague memories of calling for my parents when I was struggling to move, but I only really know the story that my parents have told me over the last 25 plus years, really. So I know that one night they put me to bed, same as normal. So I was 2 years old, and I was obviously just starting to be mobile and independent and all of that. And at some point in the night, I woke up screaming. They rushed into my room, and when they came in, they said it looked like my hips had been dislocated because of the way I was holding my legs and screaming my head off. They had to take me to the doctors, hospitals, try and figure out what was going on. It took quite a while for them to get me a diagnosis. I had a birthday during that, so I ended up being 3, and then when I had a diagnosis, it took a while to find a treatment. Between the time I started showing symptoms and getting a treatment, I lost all of my mobility that I'd gained as a child. I completely seized up. I had to rely on them for everything again. Back to needing a nappy. I was back to needing to be carried everywhere. I couldn't move. I couldn't get out of bed. Can't really remember if I could get out of bed before that, but I completely lost.
I'm sure you could at 2.
Yeah, I assume I could. But I kind of lost all of that. When they eventually found treatment and they got me to be on medication for it, I remember being bought a toy that was like a bounce Tigger, and he bounced on its tail. It was like a little animatronic, however you say that word. And that literally taught me how to bounce again. And that because it taught me how to jump. And that because I'd lost all of that.
Wow. Well, it was a good purchase then,
yeah,
whoever
definitely
bought you that. And so you were obviously a small child, so really you've not known any other way of living. This has been part of your life and part of, I suppose, who you are. So what about when you got older, when you were like 5 and 6 and then 10 and then big school and, moving through those stages of childhood?
Well, I didn't know any different. I didn't really realise that I was different to my peers in school up until I was around 5 or 6. I remember having to be pulled out of school because I had to have a blood test or something. I just remember looking up and realising all of my friends were sitting down for circle time and getting to stay in school, and I was one of those nerdy people who loved school, and I was having to be taken out to have this blood test. I didn't mind a blood test back then because I used to make all of the nurses do them on my teddy bears instead. Before they were allowed to touch me, they had to practice on the teddy bears. And that was when I kind of realised that something was a bit different about me. And then when I was about 7 or 8, they thought I was going into remission, which means my arthritis was kind of curing itself and I'd outgrown it. They thought. They were wrong. It was just well managed. And they took me off my medication because if she's in remission, she's healthy, she can go back, she can live a normal life. But I wasn't in remission, it was well managed, and I ended up going into a very bad flare-up that lasted well until I was about 14, 15.
Really? Yeah.
And I started needing a wheelchair occasionally. I had to have steroid injections in pretty much all of my joints again and again every year, potentially twice a year. I was on lots of different medications because they didn't work for me, and they just had to keep trying new ones until they found what would work. So then I was kind of in and out of school a lot because I had to keep going to hospital appointments and doctors and blood tests and surgery. So I kind of missed a lot of that kind of core school stuff that I needed. And then when I was a teenager, I kind of rebelled quite hard because I didn't like having to take medication every day. I didn't like that I had to go to hospital. I didn't like that I had to have blood tests. I didn't want it. I didn't want that life. I wanted to be like my mates.
Yeah, of course.
So if I was taking medication that was like oral, that was like liquids or tablets, I wouldn't take it properly, which didn't help. It was a really bad idea.
No, yeah.
As when I was a kid, it was that like the only thing I can control. This is the thing that I can control. This is mine. That and eating, which I didn't do. So I kind of just like, well, I can't do anything. I can't live my life the way I want to. This keeps stopping me. So I'm just going to not going to do what I'm supposed to do because this is the only thing that I can manage.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because that natural kicking against the rules and against your parents was doing you more harm.
Yes.
But it's like asserting your independence.
It was, and I feel really sorry for my parents for it because they were, at one point, they were having to inject me sometimes twice a week, and they were having to mix up these injections, and I ended up hating them because of it. And I feel awful saying that now because I love my parents to bits, but knowing that they had to deal with that breaks my heart. And at one point, I was on a medication, and back then, they've changed the formula now. It felt like lava when it was being injected. So I had to literally be held down because I was about 13, so I fought because it hurt. So I had like my parents holding me down because I had to inject this quite slowly and that. And they literally would just feed me sherbet sticks until it was done because it had to be done over like 5 seconds. But those 5 seconds felt like 10 hours.
It must have been really hard for them.
For the most part, they tried their best to kind of keep our relationship semi-normal and that. I think the thing that struggled the most was probably my brother because he was my older brother and he was just kind of in the background a lot because a lot of stuff revolved around Heather needs medication, Heather needs to go to the doctors, Heather needs surgery, blah, blah, blah. And he was kind of pushed aside a bit.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, they tried, they did what they could, but it's not easy when you've got one sick child and one healthy child.
It's difficult. It's really difficult. So moving on from your childhood, your teenage years, I know you went through some dark moments. Are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So they are kind of in my childhood and my teen years and in my 20s. So I started struggling with depression probably from the time I was about 8. I remember after I went through remission and then I was taken off medication and put back on medication. I remember having to sit in front of these tablets because I had to take 6 tablets once a week and I couldn't swallow them. It was like they got stuck in my throat and I'd choke on them. It's like my mouth would swell. And my parents would leave me in front of them in the hopes that being out of the way would make me just take them. But I just have to sit there all day until I took them. But I couldn't manage a way of taking them. I just remember being so upset and heartbroken that I had to do this and unable to do it. That I was like, I literally would take a kitchen knife and try to stab myself. It did not work because as 8-year-old is not strong enough and they cannot stab through rib bone. But I was dramatic as well, which doesn't help. But I was like, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And then that kind of carried on throughout my teen years. It got to the point where I self-harmed quite badly. I tried to commit suicide a couple of times. My best friend took me down when I was sitting on the edge of a railway bridge just about to go off. And then she quite literally talked me down because she knew how much I was struggling. She did that quite a few times, really. And she just kind of kept me somewhat grounded. She didn't have the best mental health herself, which didn't help. It was just that not knowing what my life would be like, how I could live my life with my health the way it was and is. And I carried on self-harming up until it'll be about 2 years this July, and it's still something I struggle with every day. The last time I tried to commit suicide was in 2020 because COVID hit and I had to self-isolate for 3 months.
Yeah.
I couldn't see anyone. I couldn't even leave the house technically. I wasn't supposed to go outside because it was too high of a risk. And I really struggled. And I tried to have an overdose. And my parents just were like, okay, well, we can't fully shield because that's too important to not support. So they were like, well, we'll sneak round and keep an eye on me.
Yeah.
And they still do. They still babysit my medications. If they go away, they have to send me a location for a medication every day. So in that, you're not allowed too much at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Just in case, because all it takes is one bad day, one day where pain's too much. You just want it all to stop. I'm better now. I am. And that thanks to my husband and my family. But it's still a struggle.
Yeah, something you have to deal with every day. And how do you do that? We've met before and my impression of you was that you were incredibly positive and determined to make the best out of life. Undoubtedly, as you've already said, you have days where it's just not easy to put that smile on your face. So, I mean, how do you manage that on a daily basis? What does a day look like for you? And how do you adapt when you're having a bad day?
I don't have a normal kind of day to day. If I'm doing something, like if I'm volunteering, because I do volunteer work with Arthritis UK, then I will traditionally wake up an hour and a half before whatever it is, unless it's in the evening, at which point I will wake up at 2 p.m. because I need that amount of sleep. And those days where I have to wake up early, I end up struggling through them. But I will go out and do the thing, and then I will literally come home and collapse in a heap. And that's kind of it. On the days where I'm volunteering, that's all I do. And that might be an hour, but it could be more. It depends on the day. And there are times where I have to pull out because I just cannot manage it. It's hard.
Is that your energy, or is it the pain, or is it a combination of both? I mean, the mental energy that it takes you to be able to do what you're planning to do?
It's kind of everything. When you're in pain all the time, because I'm in agony every second of every day because I have nerve damage as well as arthritis. It's a bit like keeping a wall up in the back of your mind, and behind that wall is this voice screaming in pain, because that's the only part of you that can scream. Because if you scream all the time, you're eventually going to run out of voice. And it's being able to concentrate whilst battling and keeping that wall up, because if it dissolves and you feel the pain fully, you collapse. But then you also have to deal with the fatigue, and the fatigue makes it feel like every day you're crawling through syrup. At least for me, it feels like every day I'm trying to do stuff, I'm following along and doing these things, and it feels like I'm drowning in treacle because it's so hard to do every movement, everything I need to do. But I also know that I enjoy doing it, that it does give me purpose, and it means I do actually live a life when for a long time I didn't.
But now you've got a husband, a fabulous husband.
I do. We got married, it'll be 6 years this November and 5 years this October, because we had 2 weddings, COVID. But yeah, I have a lovely husband. We don't live together because I can't manage living with another person when I'm in this much pain. I manage pain by, at the end of the day, I shut down, and it's like any noise becomes pain.
Right, okay.
Whereas he also has his own chronic health issues, and he needs the noise, otherwise he can't live. So we do not manage pain the same, and it does not work. It ends up with one of us screaming and crying in pain, and it just doesn't work. He comes up for a few days a month, a couple of times a month maybe, depending on what we're doing, and it works for us. And it also means
it works for you.
It does, and it means when he's annoying me, he can go home, which is
maybe
great.
I should try that with my husband.
It works really well. Part of the reason I can manage to be any kind of positive about my life is after I overdosed 6 years ago, I really kind of had a moment to look at my life and realise that I wasn't living. I was just kind of waiting for something, waiting for death pretty much. And I'd also just miscarried, which was part of why I got to that such a low point. And I just decided that I felt like I was living every moment of my life hiding who I was, who I am, my story, my life. And every moment just felt like I was not being honest with myself, with people, with my husband, with my family, with my parents, everyone. So I just kind of decided that even though my life is difficult, and it is, and I still have moments that make me want to burst into tears and scream all at once, I need to be honest about my story. I need to be able to tell it the way I want to tell it, because it's still mine, it's still my life, and my story can help people. And it has, I know it has.
Yes.
Being able to be honest about that is quite scary when I first started, but it's also really freeing to know that I can just talk about my life and I don't have to hide anything.
Yeah. I'm sure that had a good impact on your own mental health, actually sharing your story. It
has. It's just kind of made me look at things a different way.
And so you're involved with Arthritis UK. I know you volunteer with them, but the services they provide, would it be something you would recommend for people to visit their website? And we'll put the website in the notes here.
I would absolutely say people should visit the website, see what's available in your area, and get some support from them. I will be honest, in my area there wasn't much that I could access, so I made it, because that was just who I am.
You made it happen. Yeah.
I run it in my area, or at least in my little town. And even though it's kind of different running it than just a member of the public, it's so rewarding getting to speak to people who understand and hear people's stories, and even just have that moment where people do understand. You can say, I'm just having a bad day and I don't feel, my brain isn't computing today. And they get it, because they all have those days.
And you don't have to explain it.
Yeah.
I was different because my condition wasn't chronic, but I had breast cancer and I had surgery and chemo and radiotherapy and all the works, the full works. That was in 2012. And I joined a dragon boat team. I was one of the founding members, but that was the same thing. Now, we were doing physical activity because the action of paddling is actually very beneficial to people who've had surgery, had lymph nodes removed. But it was the same thing. You didn't have to explain.
Absolutely.
To be around people who get you, and also that you know that you are helping them in some way is really important, I think.
It is. I mean, when I teach Chi Mi to them, because obviously you're my Chi Mi instructor, and it's quite amusing. There's always ends up being a joke about the fact that we can hear somebody creaking, so we always have music playing, because otherwise the noise of creaking joints is hilarious. But it's just that, like, it's always a joke because we all have them, and it is funny. But it's quite nice not having to kind of say, I'm sorry, I'm a bit creaky today. It's just normal because they all get it.
No, it's just everybody gets it. And just on that, the 320 way is all about 3-minute movement moments you can do throughout your day. So it's not about doing long exercise, but just little simple movements that just might help improve balance or improve even mental health. But you are as physically active as you can be. Just maybe tell us a little bit about that.
I am definitely as physically active as I can be. Technically, sometimes I think I'm a little bit more active than I can be because I end up collapsing in a heap. But I teach Chi Mi once a week. It used to be twice, but I've just left one of the sessions because I was just struggling too much to physically do it. But I also do little bits every now and then when I can. I try to do it every day. I do not manage it every day, but I always do like some of the mobilizers and stuff because I find it just kind of just loosens my joints up. One of my physios when I was younger used to always say, little and often, a little bit every now and then. Every time you need to transfer to go to the toilet, add a step, and it builds up, and it does, and it makes it easier to manage. It really does help.
Yeah, that's actually the whole philosophy of the 320 way, little and often. As you know, I'm currently on crutches because I tore my cruciate ligament and I've had surgery. And it's really interesting because I've been having to sit for long periods and I'm like, this is awful. So I do like little move every 30 minutes. I'm pumping my ankles, pumping my feet, doing a little bit of heel slides, activating my quad, just doing little movements and being on the crutches just yesterday. This is like 12 days post-surgery. I just felt my legs just starting to get a little bit better. But with this injury, it's a long road, a lot of physio. And one of the dangers is doing too much and setting yourself back, which I'm going to have to be really careful of.
Yeah.
But with that, I went to the shopping mall because I wanted to get something to wear. And I knew I couldn't go around the shopping mall because this was only Saturday and today's Wednesday. So I thought, I'm going to need a wheelchair. So my husband got me an electric wheelchair so that I could get around the mall. And knowing I was going to be talking to you, it was very interesting for me to be in a wheelchair. Just the way people looked at me. Like properly looked at me. And then just the way I had to think about where I was in the mall, where I wanted to go. And, it's on 2 floors and it was like a whole thing. And so just talk to us about what it's like to be a wheelchair user and the misconceptions, the things you have to face and how we can be better towards people who are using a wheelchair.
I think remembering that age has absolutely nothing to do. I've had people, especially when I was younger and I was like a teenager in a wheelchair, assuming that because I was in a wheelchair, because I was younger, I didn't have any intellect, I wasn't intelligent, or I had a learning disability and that was why I was in a chair. So they would talk to my parents or my nan, granddad, or whoever was with me. I did once have somebody to speak to a random stranger who just happened to be next to me rather than speak to me. And that includes medical professionals who have my medical documents all in front of them. I've had people quite literally move my chair out of the way. Instead of it saying, excuse me, just moving me out of the way. The other week I had someone swearing at me in the hospital because I was looking at the sandwiches. They didn't say excuse me or anything. They literally climbed over my chair and knocking stuff off. And I just said, you could have said excuse me. And they literally was swearing at me saying you could have fucking moved and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, it's basic decency. It's not hard.
Yeah. You wouldn't do that with anybody else?
No.
Would you? Well, maybe that person would, but generally.
It doesn't help that most shops and areas that we go to are not built for people with disabilities. If they have been built in the last 20, 30 years, they have been built to the legal limit, but the legal limit does not necessarily mean it's accessible. You know, when you go to a fully accessible facility, the doors are wider because they can fit a wheelchair through. The lifts are bigger so a wheelchair can turn inside of them and come out, because it's not easy to reverse and it can damage the building.
Yes, I discovered that on my little experience there on Saturday.
I mean, shops...
I got stuck in a lift.
I mean, shops, I feel so much inside them, like clothing rails and all of this, that if you cannot figure out a way around them, you're going to knock things off. I love shopping, but I will only go in shops because I'm not even going to try because it's tiny and cramped and awful. I've had people give me filthy looks for going into a shop. It just makes you not want to bother.
And it must make you just angry and you just want to shout at people.
Yeah.
But what would you say would be really helpful? To me, I see a person in the street in a wheelchair. I think sometimes we don't know what to do. I think sometimes it's awkwardness. Is this the right thing to do? I mean, there's no excuse for being rude. Absolutely no excuse. But maybe you could tell us a way of saying things or what somebody said to you and what would have been a better way to approach that.
I'm going to be brutally honest that when you're in a wheelchair, especially if you're younger, I don't know if it's the same when you're older because I've not got there yet. People have a habit of assuming you always need help. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you can't reach the thing on the top shelf and you need help because sometimes I can't reach the thing on the top shelf just because I'm short. But when you have, say, 10 people offer to help you in the space of half an hour, it gets frustrating. Most people in a wheelchair have kind of ways of asking for help without having to actually go up to a random stranger and say, "Can you help me, please?" It's just that kind of looking around to see if there's anyone who looks nice who might come and offer, rather than waiting for someone to ask. Because a lot of times when people ask, it's something that's not actually that difficult for them to manage.
Is that a personal thing, or do you think that's something across, obviously you speak to other people who are wheelchair users.
I mean,
do you think...
I'm on different Facebook disability groups because it's nice to just kind of have that support and there's quite a few people who get quite frustrated with it. I do not get frustrated. I know people are doing it because they want to help and they're nice and it's done it out of kindness. I live in a little town, so most people know I do not need help because I will go whizzing around 5 miles an hour perfectly happy. But I do think it is something a lot of us deal with because people do want to help and they are being nice. But when you don't need help, constantly being asked feels like they're just assuming, like they're judging that you're going to need help because you're in a wheelchair, when this is your way of life. This is where you manage life.
So not to just assume a person needs help. They've got their independence. They are managing whatever condition they have.
Absolutely. I'm saying that if you see them and they're obviously struggling, do not go and say, "Do you need a hand?" But if you can see someone and they're just living life,
they don't need help.
Don't need help. Just leave them. Some people, they will ask because it makes them feel good, because it's that, I've done my little good act of kindness by offering, which is fine. But ask the little old lady who's actually struggling with something.
I'm tall and I often get asked in supermarkets to reach up off the top shelf, but I would never go up to somebody who was short and say, "Do you need help?"
No.
Like, it would be so inappropriate. But somebody will come up to me and say, "Could you get me that off the top shelf? I just can't reach."
People will find someone who looks nice to go and ask if they actually need help. I will admit I struggle with that. I do not like asking for help, because I'm really stubborn. But I will ask if I need help most of the time.
Okay, that's really helpful. So, Heather, I think we've more come to the end of our time and I could talk to you for a lot longer. But I think it's just been really lovely to hear your story and also to hear about somebody who's young.
Everyone kind of forgets that disability is the only minority group that everyone will be a part of at some point in their life. It could be from a young age, it could be short-term or long-term, but everyone will be a part of that group. Everyone needs things to be accessible because at some point they're going to need it. And it's only when they actually get to that point where they are in that group that they realise. It's the
Yes.
thing that politicians and anyone who does any kind of building design needs to kind of remember, that they're all going to need that soon, and what benefits a wheelchair user will benefit other people as well. Drop curbs and wheelchair spaces on buses were brought in by people like me in so many decades ago, when they had to crawl upstairs to earn that right. Whereas now they've got them, they are used by lots of different groups of people because they are useful. You know, it is still a fight.
And not parking on pavements.
Yeah, we've got.
I mean, I remember that when I was pushing a pram and I had to go on the road.
No, I will say that because I'm normally in an electric wheelchair when I'm out of a house, it cannot go down a normal curb if it is not a drop curb. And by a drop curb, I mean less than 2 centimetres, because some of them are not less than 2 centimetres. That means I have to stay in the road until I find a drop curb. I've been doing that on literally the winter solstice, darkest night of the year, in a tiny little village with next to no street lights, with my husband trying to kind of shine a torch at people to say, there's somebody in the road, be careful, because it's like, well, I cannot find a drop curb and I cannot get out of the road and that. And people were honking and swearing at me. I'm like, I'm not trying to do this. It's not my fault. This little tiny village hasn't got a drop curb.
Yeah. Well, listen, the fight goes on.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're going to continue to be an activist and fight for more accessibility. And I think you're amazing and inspiring. And as you were talking earlier, I was going to say, what came into my head was, you're really brave. But I remember people saying that to me when I had cancer. And I remember thinking, I have no choice. I have to go through this. Yeah. And so, you're really brave, always used to land a bit strange with me because I never quite knew what to say.
It does. It is a weird thing to say because it's like, well,
isn't it?
It's either this or I don't exist. I've tried that option. Don't mind this option that much most of the time.
Yeah. But it's just, I don't know what other word to use, but I think you're really brave. Inspiring. You're inspiring, and I hope this podcast, people listen to this podcast and they will be inspired and they will go to the Arthritis UK website, have a look at the services there, and I just really want to thank you for taking part.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I will admit it's the first time I've done this, but it's quite exciting to do, and I had a great time chatting with you.
Brilliant. Well, look, have a lovely day, and I'm sure we'll speak again.
Oh, right.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the 320 Way in Conversation with Karen Case. Like, listen and subscribe for upcoming episodes and join the growing 320 Way community at 320way.com.